you for coming this evening. This is a fantastic crowd. Probably needed a microphone for a crowd this big. So welcome, thank you. And I know it's cold out, so I'm glad you're all here. And hopefully you had a chance to partake of our treats and our beverages for the evening. My name is Melissa Lampe. I am the president of the Watertown Historical Society. And
I'm Marie Hilgendorf, I'm president of the Genealogy Society.
So we decided to team up this evening for the special Christmas presentation, not a performance, presentation. We're going to be showing you vintage pictures of old Watertown in the snow and decorated for Christmas, and the interior of wonderful old church scenes from long ago. Randy Roeseler, who is a member of the Watertown Historical Society, he's our board treasurer, will be leading the presentation this evening, and Mrs. Ginny Smith will be playing some Christmas songs on the piano for all of us throughout the evening. Randy.
Well, good evening. I wanted some nice weather for this evening, but I didn't think we needed the snow quite this early to set the mood. So thank you all for coming out. The pictures that you're going to see this evening are from a variety of sources in the community, and I wanted to make that clear up front that you didn't think they were all from the books at my house. They are from various church archives, from the historical calendars that the Chamber of Commerce used to print, from Bill Yonke's collection, some from David Hurdle, Ken Riedel helped us. A rich variety of resources. If there's a photo that you really enjoy, you can see me afterwards about getting a copy. If it's my personal photo, I'll help you immediately. If it's not mine, I'll direct you to the person who owns the photo so that it's copied properly. It's a respect factor that we should always enjoy. If I were to name the presentation this evening, it would be called History, Humor, and Harmony. The harmony part comes because you're going to help us with music as we go through this walk through Watertown's Winter Wonderland. And we're going to start the evening with Jingle Bells, accompanied by Ginny Smith. And if you'll bring up the screen, Melissa, they'll have the words. In case you didn't know the words to Jingle Bells. Oh, and one important item. We'll need your keys for the Jingle Bell part. That's what gets the whole computer to kick in. So when we get to that part, you're going to need a light. So here we are, around 1900 at the corner of South 3rd and Wisconsin Street, in a one-horse open sleigh. Oh, actually, he's got two horses. He's well-to-do. He did well on his investments. Veterans Park is behind him, and this is the Buchheit Mansion, which later became Trinity Lutheran Church, and then in the 1950s, Trinity rebuilt on that same location. A pair of matched horses, very polished, shiny sleigh, so it is definitely a part of his pride and joy. He looks comfortable. He's got an open collar, so it's definitely not a bitter cold day like today, probably no wind chill. And he looks just a little bit concerned, so we decided that someone had mentioned polar vortex to him. And he wasn't quite sure what that meant. He's heading into the downtown. In the distance we see a small cart and a horse. Might have been a milk wagon making deliveries. This is also at Veterans Park on South 3rd Street. The statue is in full view. In the distance we see the red brick church, which was the Congregational Church and later became Heritage Hall for the 1st Brigade Band. That church was built in 1909. We date this photo to around 1910, 1912. This woman is walking at a very brisk pace. There's a flare to her skirt. She is really moving. Either there's a great sale downtown, she's late for work, or somebody mentioned polar vortex to her and she thought it was foul language. But she's moving, and all the snow has been hand shoveled. This was known as the Gondolier Club, and it was located on Division Street. Today, in the approximate area, there is a small restroom building just beside the tennis courts. That's about where this was located. You can see many people on the ice skating. In the distance is the beginning of Riverside Park as we know it today. It's sunny because there are some shadows being cast. Ice skating was a huge, huge pastime years ago in this area. There were many skating clubs. They competed. The late Ray Dobratz told me that when he was a kid in the 1930s and the early 40s, that when it froze hard, the young people knew all the side rivers that fed into the Rock River. They would often skate over on the ice all the way to Oconomowoc and compete and then skate back. Very comfortable. They had warming houses along the way. That's why they could eat snacks and remain thin. This is a very cherished photo from downtown Watertown. You can see some more skaters on the Rock River, Water Street in the background. This is approximately the area today that is Johnson Arms, the apartment dwelling. This is behind what was for many years our city hall and fire department. Today that area is a parking lot along the river. And yes, Watertown had a ski jump, a dangerous ski jump, and it was enjoyed by many, many people every winter. This is high on the hill, and you'll see in just a moment, it's a side of the Octagon House. People came down the street and ended up somewhere in the vicinity of what is today Concord Avenue. Back then it was pretty much just a simple road, hardly paved. So here's the side view of that jump. You can see the Octagon House in the distance. They would have climbed up a ladder or a set of steps, got in place, and then either jumped or left their toboggan go. Later on, when traffic became more populated, the skating and the skiing on that hill and sledding had to stop because it was dangerous. In fact, there was one fatality with a car and a child. But many years ago, about 20 years ago, an elderly customer of mine told me that she and her brother climbed up there with their toboggan, and when it was their turn, he gave a mighty push and down they went. And they left the chute and remained airborne over Concord Avenue, over the riverbank, and landed about the middle of the river and then ended their slide at the other riverbank. Oh my gosh. And she said, you know, it went so fast they held their breath, but she said when they turned around and looked, they could see from the distance all of their friends on the hill with their mouths wide open. And as she said, and here I am, 86 years old. These two ladies are not tobogganing. They came along to watch the excitement. It's the 1920s. We can tell by their hats. This one might be fashionable. This one's sensible. She's got a fur hat, fur muffs, and just tiny little shoes and nylons, no winter protection on their feet at all. And so that brings us to the point where we have to have a giveaway in honor of these two ladies. I'll let you draw the first box, or first name rather. Sherry Beaver. Where is Sherry? There she is. I'll let you pass this along. She's getting some Swiss Miss chocolate so she can warm up. And that will bring us to another song for you to join in on. Winter Wonderland, Sleigh Bells Ring. picnic and to walk in all the seasons since the turn of the last century. Here we are in the 1960s in the old playground looking up toward the upper pavilion and the restrooms and then Laborie Street. It doesn't look all that much different today. Depends on how much snow has fallen. This is the lower drive, which curves around to a city building. Those are the two dovecotes that are still standing today. This area is today Chamberland. And across this area is the lagoon to the island at Riverside Park. Again, parts of it are the same as they were in the 1960s when this photo was taken, and a few things have changed for us. At the north end of Riverside Park used to be what people called the deer pens. It was a little enclosed area with deer and a few other animals. This is two of the deer. They were fairly tame because they were used to people coming in to feed them corn and other scraps, and then of course the city workers tended them. It was a popular spot to stop. These houses still stand on Laborie Street. And of course the collection included a wise old owl perched on his box. You can see there's chicken wire to keep the enclosure, and I don't know if he was a wounded bird that couldn't be released back into the wild, or if it was a pet that someone found an owlet and raised it. It was a very different world years ago, but I know that that was a treasured site for a lot of children based on accounts that we've had. So the Winter Wonderland also involved work, and people derived their living in a variety of ways that we don't have today, and one of them was ice making. Here you can see the men on the Rock River. The horses drag large saws that cut deep into the ice, and then they cut long channels, and they're about 2.5 feet wide, and then they cut another one, and then other men stand on that floating ice and cut the blocks out. They're usually around 2 feet wide by 7 or 8 feet long, and then later on they were made into smaller blocks to be brought to your houses for your ice box. This occupation was popular in helping local people keep their items cooler in summer months, but it also became hugely popular for employing people with the advent of the refrigeration car. And Mr. Armour from the Armour factory perfected a railroad car for shipping meat to other parts of the nation. And so suddenly all the different ice houses in the upper Midwest had many extra orders for ice, which was shipped to that meatpacking plant to prepare the railroad cars. So for a while it became a very good industry. A lot of those men in the summer months either were on their own farms or hired out to other people for farming and carpentry. Those types of fields of work became quiet during the winter months, so this was something they could do. It still took a lot of fortitude. You're out in bitter cold weather in the elements. They didn't have the protective clothing that we have today. And if you aspire to new heights in the new year, these men in the spring of 1908 are finishing the north steeple at St. John's in Watertown. And they have gone up the staircase, then up ladders inside this tower, through a trapdoor, and then they climb up this rigging somehow and around, and then this little ladder gets them up to the top of the steeple, all of which is OSHA approved. See, the windows are in various state of being installed. That building had to be sealed up before they could plaster and paint and stencil, so a lot of work is still ahead for those people. This would be the early winter of 1908. These gentlemen have just finished shoveling out parts of Main Street after the great snowstorm in March of 1881. It was a blizzard that dumped incredible amounts of snow on the area. It fortunately disappeared with warm weather, or they would have been pretty much crippled all winter. It stopped train traffic, it stopped any kind of horse-drawn wagon movement. It kept people in their homes. People had to climb out of their second-story windows to get out because the snow drifted so high up the lower levels on those little houses. This corner would be where Watertown siding is today. This building still stands. Some of these have either been remodeled or have been removed. This is a recently seen photograph for most of us, courtesy of Ken Riedel. Before I go into details, does anyone want to guess as to where you're standing? It's a spot many of us cross daily or a couple times a week. We are standing on the Katy Street Bridge looking east, and I'll explain all the other parts. This at the time was the Berzinger Brewery. It later was the site of the Hartig Brewery. All these little homes were removed in 1918 and 1920 to clear off the entire block to become a memorial park for the veterans of World War I. Today it's the site of the Watertown Municipal Building. The clock tower is the original tower for St. Henry's Catholic Church. In 1891, the church was greatly expanded and a beautiful clock tower was built on the rear portion of the building off the altar area. This is their original clock tower, and this is the second sanctuary building of St. John's. It was built in 1864 and remained there until 1907. These men are also digging out in 1881. How they got their little one-horse open sleigh to where it is, I don't know, but it's obvious they're not going to go too far. And again, you can see where they're standing and how high the snow is drifted through that area. So before we sing Silver Bells, and we've done all that hard work making ice and shivering out in the cold, it's time for another treat. Phyllis Schmidt. Phyllis Schmidt is going to warm up with Progresso soup. So please join in singing Silver Bells. This view is from the collection of Bill Yankee. Every Christmas, Bill sends out a Christmas card based on a Watertown winter scene. This is from around World War I, 1918, 1920. That bump on Main Street is some form of a manhole cover. We are standing in front of Watertown Library looking east into the downtown. This would be what we knew as Fisher's Department Store. Today it's the bike shop. This area is the Watertown Daily Times and so on. Notice the garland over Main Street. Here we have a design with one arch and wreaths. And then in the next picture, we're looking the other direction, but you'll notice there are two gatherings and then back over. All of those garlands were lit with light bulbs and they were illuminated at night. I'm sure many of you have seen the movie It's a Wonderful Life. And Bedford Falls in the night scenes has the garland. That was popular in many, many parts of the United States. And that and many other hometown touches from that movie are what made it so popular, because by the 1950s and 60s, enough had changed after the war. People realized what that movie had captured. And this is the sort of thing, all that hometown decoration. This is a busy day in downtown Watertown. There are cars parked everywhere. It's snowing. Everything is covered. It's overcast. We can hardly see St. Bernard's. At that particular time, the red brick building was Montgomery Ward. Later became Kresge's. The classic movie theater, its big iconic sign is outside ready to be glowing in the night. This view is from a photo donated to the Society about 10 years ago by Loris Klingbeil from Arizona. This is on East Main looking into the downtown. This block, this particular house, is where Family Video is today. Or some of you would remember that as the old Piggly Wiggly. The next block, those houses are the parking lot for Hardee's. This building for many years was known as the Armory, and then it was the Yak in the 1960s. Today it's the site of the hotel. And you'll have to forgive me, is it Heritage? Yes. Heritage. I remembered some of the previous names. In the distance on this building, we could see the sign that said it was the A. Cramp Company, was a blacksmith shop. Today that red brick building is home to a variety of professional offices, a chiropractor, the eye shop, glasses are in there. This picture was taken around 1920. Whatever happened was a very wicked storm. You can see the ice, the sleet and snow are blown and frozen up the front of all the storefronts. The lesson in this picture is if there is a warning to not park on the streets for snow removal, don't mess around with that. And we have a prize for that too. Susie Herzog. Back to Susie, it's an ice scraper. This is another view from that 1881 blizzard in downtown Watertown. This building is today Johnson and Hellickson. For many years, a lot of you knew it as Elliott's. For a while in the 1980s, it was Maurice's. This would be Frank's Cafe. In the distance, that building was torn down and became the M&I Bank, and then it's still, the replacement building is still there, but it's not a bank anymore. Again, there's a path for some travel, but you can see quite a bit of snow piled up against the buildings, so there wasn't too much going on, but some brave souls walked through or were living on the second floors of those buildings and got out to start digging out. According to this, it's 8:20 in the morning. These ladies have begun their shopping at the Stubbe Floral Company, which was on East Main Street, 404, which would be just a couple doors east of Century 21. It's in that 400 block of East Main. Again, it's World War I era. They have still some longer dresses on. There was a time in the early 1900s where poinsettias were sold by the stem as a cut flower. They were very rare, very specialized, and then later on there were more poinsettias, but they were quite sensitive to too much heat or too much draft, and today they've been developed where they can withstand a lot. So as these two ladies started shopping, they decided to start picking up supplies too. Oh, Marie Hilgendorf, where's Marie? Marie gets some bows. Here we are inside the Kerner and Pingle hardware store on 2nd and Madison Street area. This is probably the late 40s, early 1950s. There's an interesting clock display here for all different types of alarm clocks to help you get up and get going. Step stools, which were quite the popular item in that era. A variety of waste baskets, some space heaters, all sorts of enamelware. They had a pot for every occasion. And Pyrex for those bridal shower gifts. This is another view of that same store. Here it's specifically Christmas. We can see the paper icicle garland. There's some sort of a decoration here that looks like it probably sweeps up, back and forth, and forms some sort of a tree where there's some ornaments hanging. And in the background there's a display that says Season's Greetings. On this side of the room we see lots of aluminum, a coffee pot or tea kettle to cover all your needs. Mr. Pingle, this display from another photo we know contains jackknives and hunting equipment for the young men and the boys. The background is a display of new cabinetry that you can buy for your home or if you're remodeling. And the thing that has recently become aware to me was I've looked at this lady, this is from my private collection, I've looked at this photo for 20 plus years trying to figure out what on God's name that woman is doing on a card table in the middle of the store. And I looked and finally it dawned on me. When everybody went home at 5 o'clock, it got colder and colder and colder till you came in the morning and fired up the furnace, which took a while to warm the boiler, which took a while to get steam in the radiator. She's sitting next to the radiator doing the bookwork in the middle of the store. This is the ladies' finery department at the old Schempf Brothers store on the second or third floor. Nylons and other unmentionables in boxes. Doubtful that any gentleman approached this floor unless he was the guy cleaning and sweeping. They have a lot of sales clerks on hand, which I'm not sure if some of them popped in to be in the photo or if they really all worked in that small department. Everything was handled person by person and by hand. So it wasn't like you came and shopped on your own. So they may have all been in that little department. This lady right here is the late Hildegard Kister, who worked in that department and lived to be 104 years old. And a very healthy 104 years old. She was on our shut-in list at church for Christmas caroling. And she loved to go out to eat if given the opportunity, and she enjoyed playing cards. So every time we got to her house to sing, she wasn't there. Because somebody had came and carefully picked her up and took her out. Finally, we made an appointment one year and said, we're coming to carol. So there she was, and she used a wheelchair in the house, and she sang better than most of the choir members in a beautiful alto voice. So shut-in was a different word for her, and at that point she was past 100. This department store photo is from the Historical Society archives. We think it's the inside of the Gruby hardware store downtown Watertown. Henry Gruby later became the mayor, and he and his wife Zeta built the beautiful mansion on South 5th Street, which was Marcella Manor for many years. It's near Trinity Church. Now this store has a dark ceiling, could be painted that way, or it could just be an accumulation of soot from fire, from the wood stoves and so forth. Kegs of nails and various hardware supplies, but in the background we had baking tins and jello molds and muffin pans, more enamelware, watering cans, different types of handles back here for equipment. And back here in the ceiling, there is an opening to the second floor because there were skylights from the roof of the building that helped to illuminate the rear portion of the store. And definitely very cautious people. This fixture is gas. This fixture is electric. So no matter what happened with the power supply, they were covered. This is the inside of the Bittner grocery store on North 4th Street. That's the tavern building that burnt a year ago. It was, I think it's called Stacy's today on the corner. The Bittner family had the bar on the corner and a grocery store next door and lived upstairs. Long and narrow. All the cans are just like in perfect alignment, arranged beautifully. This is the era where you came in with your list and they would fulfill it for you and put it in your bag or your box, or you could call in and then they would deliver it to your home. Interesting, here's the stove in the center of the room. There's the pipe, and then it turns and goes out a back wall. Truly central heat. The candy in this display case and this one has a real pretty paper border added to dress up the case. There wasn't much packaged candy years ago. People typically went to the candy shop and a little box was created or a bag, and they just bought enough for that particular treat. What I've been wondering about is this fruit and vegetable display. Watertown had many neighborhood grocery stores. There was Bittner's, Harry Boyham's, Katie Wolf up on, or Katie got it from a relative, but that was up on Katie Street. There was Luther's, Sasma's, and I'm missing a couple. They were all over town, little family grocery stores. What I wondered is that fruit and vegetables didn't travel well. So I wondered if one or two of them ordered and then they split the commodities, or if every one of them had their own resource, because all of that had to come by train, and you had to be at the train to meet it in the early morning to get your produce. And whether it was daytime or nighttime, the Wisconsin Electric Company was there to greet you for the holidays. This is the red brick corner building on 3rd and Main Street. Today it's part of the shoe store. The star is a crucifix star. It forms a cross, but the rays come out to kind of make it look like a star. It's very nice by day and by night. These two photos came from the private collection of the late Irene Scholes, who was a longtime employee of the power company. This is the inside of Stragy's grocery store in the 1950s. I cannot tell, even with the magnifying glass, if this is Christmas or Easter candy, but it's candy, so it got my attention. The ladies are wearing lighter weight coats. This is the late Walter Nurnberg. I'm sure many of you might remember Walter. They're all in lighter weight coats, so it's either a fair day, or it could be that it's more toward Easter, and that's why they're dressed in lighter coats. But this is, of course, now the era where people have started using shopping carts and they pick up their own groceries. And here's Santa's house the way I would remember, and you would remember it too, wouldn't you? This is the late 1960s. It was on, at this point, it was on the corner of 2nd Street near Main. This background building is today the Johnson Hellickson building. That's the top of the what is now Bender's Law Firm. A few years after that, it was moved up to 3rd Street next to the Electric Power Company building and stayed there for quite a while, and now it's located down in the Riverwalk area, which is actually much safer for families. And since we've completed our shopping excursion and we've gone to see Santa, well, I'm going to give this person a gift. I have a hard time. Can you make out that name?
That's mine.
That looks like Glenn
It's
Casper.
yours?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
mine.
Thank God we didn't have to go through
What's the name of the gift?
Well, you get wrapping paper, so maybe
Don't hit me with it.
get together with Marie, you know?
Yeah,
She's
I
got the bowl.
Yeah, all right.
Reindeer's paws, march of good old Santa Claus, down through the chimney with lots of toys, all for the little ones' Christmas joy. Ho, 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 who wouldn't go? Ho, 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 who wouldn't go? Up on the housetop, click, 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 down through the chimney with good Saint Nick.
This lovely Christmas photo is taken inside a house on North 4th Street, across the street from St. Henry's. The house is currently for sale. It is sided with some gray and white trim and then painted brown. It's brick and siding. Really, it's that house. What's wonderful about this photo is we've had it in the archives of the Octagon House for many, many decades, and we could never use it because this lady turned her head to look up at the tree just when the photographer was snapping. And photography back then wasn't very forgiving, and there was no retake like our digital cameras. So her face was blurred from the movement. And about 8 or 9 years ago, the staff at either Webco or Budget Print worked with this for us at the Chamber of Commerce, and they were able to use new computer technology to remove the shadowing so we could actually see the lady in her living room. Typical of the era, they've got a piano. She has a lovely piano cover on it. Penny postcards on top with various family photos. The tree, like many, many trees in common homes, was decorated with bits of this and bits of that. It isn't like a matched ornament set. She couldn't go shopping for necessarily big sets of ornaments. Woolworth was just starting to bring that into the United States with this, when this was being photographed. There are toys and candies on the table. The dolls over here appear to be like a die cut, a paper doll of some sort. And there's 2 of them, so we can assume somewhere in her life there are 2 little girls who are going to have a very happy Christmas. This is the Pingle home on North 9th Street. Nice warm photo showing the snow frozen to the side of the house. There's a front view too, and Melissa, if you want to advance to that. You can see it's the very nice Greek Revival architecture with the broken pediment on top. The windows and doors are evenly spaced. This home was removed somewhere, I think in the 1970s. It's the entrance now to a large parking lot for Emmanuel Church, but the parking lot is in the middle of the block behind houses. It's kind of a secluded parking area. And you know, ice storms, they hit everywhere. It wasn't just that house. This is at 7th and Main Street. The old high school, or later the Armory building, is in the background. These 2 people are out trudging in the snow, and it's deep, and you can see the weight of the ice has, you know, broken branches down, weighted the trees quite heavily. This also shows you the beautiful armature that was on the old light posts in downtown Watertown. This photograph I added just to show you what travel was like. This little boy is standing in the middle of 6th and Jones Street in front of St. Mark's, which is fairly new. This picture is from the 1890s. It's pretty good traveling through here. It's all blown open, but up the block, there's a huge drift in front of all those buildings. With a magnifying glass, you can see a few wagon tracks through the snow or maybe a sleigh, but there's no attempt to remove the drift. You either went around it or went around the corner to the next block. These two boys are walking to school. It is in the morning. This is from the Dr. Nichols collection, which we have at the Octagon House. This is College Avenue. To this direction is Luther Prep, and these houses are all along College Avenue, very near Western Avenue. Still pretty dark and overcast. Looks like it might snow some more. And here again, the massive shovels up by Luther Prep have been completely cleaned by the time children were walking to school, all hand shoveled. From the Dr. Nichols collection, this is inside Riverside Park. We're up in the area now of the restrooms, looking down the hill. We went around the bend, we can go over to the storage area, and if we go straight ahead, we can go over the bridge onto the island. This was taken in a sunny morning after a very heavy hoar frost. This would have melted within an hour of the photo being taken. This is another view of Riverside Park, we think from the 1950s, taken on the far edge of the Division Street Bridge. We can see the lagoon. There's a walking path here, or you can walk along Laborie Street, the upper pavilion. Again, there's a hoar frost that morning. Everything's flocked and makes for beautiful photographs. And this is from the 1960s also. This is standing just on Laborie Street looking along the bridge on Division Street at the old swimming house. Just a beautiful sunny morning. The sun is coming from the east, so we can tell it's earlier in the day, but it's a lovely photo. Very well done by the amateur photographer. So well done, in fact, that we have something to help you as you walk through winter. Sharon Stores. We have a scarf for you to wrap around your neck. Keep you warm. Shoveling on a winter night, go in, get a beverage, sit in front of the fire. I go out with my camera and take pictures. This was probably about 20 years ago after a snowstorm, and I went out just snapping random photos. This is the Potts home on South 3rd Street. Front light is on. They must have thought I was coming for a visit. But you can see if you're up on the housetop hearing reindeer paws, Santa Claus has to be very careful jumping out at that house. It's a long way down. This is the home at 9th and Western Avenue. That brick home has been standing on that corner since the 1850s. If it could talk, oh, what it has seen go up and down Western Avenue and all the building on that end of town. Getting ready for this evening, I looked back through a number of printed materials. I've got a couple books that I brought from home. If you want to look, you're welcome. Looked at some of the memories from Jerry Apps. He published a book about a year and a half ago on winter in Wisconsin, the quiet season. And Wisconsin Christmas Anthology has a lot of people's remembrances over the years. And then one of my favorite things last week at a thrift shop, here's a book called We Were Children Then, and there's a section also where people recall Christmas and winter. Now this book was written in the 1970s, and it was done by amateur writers. It was an encouragement from the State Historical Society. So the people who write in here who are 80 and 90 are remembering Christmas from the very late 1800s. And one of the things they recount in these books that we don't always think of when we look at all these photos is how hard the most simple, everyday living was. You know, if they had to go out to get water from a pump, oftentimes they had to take some hot water out to prime the pump to get it to pump. Laundry was horrid in winter. You know, after doing all the laundry and wringing it out, some people did try to hang it out. I have the start of arthritis in my hands. If I had to hang wet laundry out in a line in winter, I would be like gnarled up for the rest of the season. And then some of them talked about their mothers or their aunts had clothes on little tacks, and they would, or on clothesline on tacks, and they'd string it from door to door in the room up on the door casings, and then they'd have laundry hanging everywhere for a day or two drying. So it was quite unusual and hard. But the one that made me laugh the most were people talking about having to use the facilities. And until I read the one account, I never, you know, I thought about how horrible it would be to run out to that little building in the middle of winter, but I never thought of doing that with a jacket on. And, you know, they're describing all their hardships, but the one lady recounted that some farmer in her area wrote to Sears and Roebuck that he wanted them to send his family 10 rolls of toilet paper. Now, if you're under a certain age, I'll explain to you that Sears and Roebuck was the same company we know today. They had a wonderful catalog resource.
The yellow pages were good.
Yes. Well, we're gonna get to that, Marie. So you filled out your form, or you could just use tablet paper and write down what you needed, what page it was on, send your money. People sent cash in envelopes. It wasn't a big deal. Today we tell people not to put cash in the mail. And then you'd get your order back. And some of the bigger things were sent cash on delivery, so then the mailman had to collect your cash and send it back to Sears. But anyway, this farmer wrote he wanted 10 rolls of toilet paper. One of the staff members at Sears department, and it was probably in a Chicago warehouse where they had many people working to fill orders, wrote back to him that the item he requested was on page 410 of their 590-page catalog, which was a polite way of saying, look, buddy, fill out the form. He wrote back and said, if I had your 590-page catalog, I wouldn't need the 10 rolls. Such memories for $1.99. People did decorate for Christmas. This is from December of 1940. This is the Hornicle house. Mr. Hornicle was an account exec at the power company. This is from Irene Scholz's collection. And this house is on Cole Street, just around the corner from Dewey Avenue. Doesn't that warm your heart? That's the lower dam on Concord Avenue, taken by the same photographer that I had just a few minutes ago inside Riverside Park. This area is not open water. It's bare ice. The snow has been blown off. When they say not a creature was stirring, they weren't kidding. And there's nothing moving on that dam scene. It was frozen hard. This is from the 1960s. This photo was taken on Thanksgiving Day in 1947. It's on O'Connell Street. That's the late Merlin Zabel shoveling snow. The reason I included it, the brick sidewalk, the city had not put cement sidewalks all over town yet. At that point it was brick. I have a brick sidewalk. They're lovely to look at. They are a pain to shovel. And I see some heads nodding. So imagine doing a whole corner lot with a shovel, a lot of slow poking around, a lot of hard work. Taken the same day, everything's flocked on Thanksgiving Day. We're at the back of St. Bernard's. And now we're going to get ready to go to church. Christmas Eve was a huge event at area churches. The children's services were well practiced, largely attended. People spent days and hours getting ready. Children rehearsed and practiced many beautiful old hymns and recitations. This set of steps must have been a real treat to keep shoveled, because there are railings everywhere. You just get a good slide going and bonk. And Mr. Bosk must have earned sainthood keeping that staircase clean, because he was a janitor there for many, many years. And that was that same way at St. Mark's and at St. Bernard's had a huge staircase. Not quite as much at St. Henry's, but what full-time work it was keeping those steps ready. So speaking of which, getting ready for Christmas Eve is recounted in those books as well. Children usually got new clothes for Christmas, and that was when they would first wear it, and then it had to last for a while. So they tried to keep it very clean. People recounted on Christmas they would eat very light suppers, because excited children can get sick from nervous stomach. So they had broth and light items, and then they got in their sleighs or their cutters or whatever and started off for their churches, whether in town or in the country, to have their Christmas Eve church service. So, to help Wayne Hartwig, where is Wayne? There's Wayne. I like it that everybody's winning up in front. Wayne, to help you get ready for Christmas Eve, we have toothpaste and a bar of soap. Jones. This church building was constructed in the 1870s and stood until the early 1950s, when it was replaced by their present structure. The lettering on the communion railing indicates it's their 50th anniversary. It's late in 1925. It's the German hall architecture, with, even though the church has a peaked roof, it has a flat ceiling. This is a ceiling that's done in tin, evergreen roping all around the church. Inside of St. Luke's Church, formerly on North 4th Street, this little brick building was removed for a street widening and parking lot expansion project in the 1960s. Here, the front wall is decorated showing their Golden Jubilee in 1900. Most of this was done with either crepe paper, or sometimes they used boxwood or arbovita greens, because they stayed fairly green even as they dried. And so they have the German arch blessing and the years, and then evergreen garland throughout the church, including up along the ceiling. This is called a swallowtail pulpit. It has just a very narrow base that actually rests on the altar of the church. The pastor accessed it by climbing up this little staircase. To give you an idea of how small that church is, I mean, here's the chair that the man would have sat in. You can see it's a pretty steep climb to the pulpit. Just a small, beautifully ornate brick church. St. Paul's Episcopal Church, around 1915. This church building suffered two major fires, one in the 1960s and again early in the 2000s. This is a very typical English European design. Everything here is wrapped in, again, a variety of evergreens, mostly arbovita and boxwood type evergreens around the posts. and then some around these pillars and back into the church. This is the First Baptist Church congregation, first church building, and I included the exterior because it still stands today. In the 1920s, they built a red brick building over by the post office. This is on Division Street, just up from 2nd Street. This area was nipped off and is kind of a hip roof, and there's a large porch on the front of the building, and then the window structure was changed into common windows, and there are 2 levels of living in that building. And the next photo shows the interior. The interior, again, even though it's a pitched roof, they have the flat German hall roof. This is wallpapered with 3 or 4 patterns. 2 pipes running through the church, so that meant in the back of the church were large stoves for warmth. And keep in mind, their idea of being warm is very different from ours. A simple worship area. The several Baptist denominations and the Moravian denomination predate Lutheranism, and when those church bodies formed many centuries ago, they faced much difficulty, and they worshipped in simple settings in their homes, or sometimes if there were more people, they might worship in more of a barn building where they could fit more people. But they would have members of the congregation out in the perimeter watching for authorities that might be coming to arrest them. So their worship was very simple off tables. It was not ornate in churches like we're used to. This is the present Moravian church building, which is much more ornate than their old building was. But what's fun about this photograph is here in the center, they have what is called a putz, P-U-T-Z. It is the creation of an ornate village out of different cardboard houses. Many of these pieces were handmade by members. Many Moravian families from that era recall having ornate setups like that in their homes, and the parents and aunts and uncles would work on that for days. And the children were not allowed. It was usually in the dining room, and they couldn't come in till Christmas Eve, and then they could see all the wonders of that little village. And here they've got it in the church proper. This little organ was removed later on. It's now in the Momry Moravian Church out on Highway Q. And it truly does have a tiny little keyboard. I've played it once, and if you get too fancy, you just run out of keys. This is the interior of St. John's in 1908 when the church was brand new. Both trees are decorated with a variety of candy, popcorn balls, and candles. And the candles, like this one is right here, the candles were on bamboo poles. And at one end there was a cup that held the candle, and the poles were different lengths. And then at the other end of the pole was a large, probably a 4-inch long spike, rather thin, and they would ram it into the tree. And that the candle was outside the perimeter edge of the tree for safety, because of course candles and evergreen trees can go poof pretty quickly. But the arch between says, "Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace, goodwill toward men." And that was something that they used for many, many years. In 1951, the congregation commissioned a photographer to detail their history. They were coming up on their centennial in 1952. So this was taken of the interior. You can see they've gone to one large tree, and those trees varied every year. They usually came out of someone's yard or some expansion project where a tree needed to come out. This, although you can't see it on this photo, it's a new arch, and it's got the same message in English. On Christmas Eve, the photographer stood in the front of the church and photographed all the people who were there for the service. The front portion of the church is the children of part of the school, and then you see the adults that start to fill the rest of the church, and adults throughout the gallery. And you can see there's standing room only, standing all the way back into the steeples. And more people. Here's the side of the Christmas tree. That was Christmas of 1966, the last Christmas with the church decorated with the old Gothic and Baroque architecture and the big, big tree. After that, the church was remodeled, and then again remodeled in the late 1980s. That was from a few years ago. That doesn't show how high the Christmas trees really are, but that's the altar view today. This is from 1894 inside St. Mark's in Watertown. I don't know who strung all that popcorn, but wow. I wonder if they saved it from year to year or if they put it out for the birds, but there is a lot of popcorn. And you know, a lot of trees back then had different beading on it, and they did a lot with garland to decorate. Whoever did that had a wonderful technique that's very well balanced. That tree also has candles on it, and then a variety of candy and popcorn balls. And here, I'm a member at that church. We've never figured out how they got a wreath up here suspended from the ceiling, and then the garland comes out to various parts of the balcony as it wraps around the church. It's quite an interesting effect. This is the same view of the 1920s. We can tell from the ladies' clothing. This tree has a lot of tinsel on it. Apparently nobody wanted to string popcorn at that time. Ornaments, and they were still doing candy on the trees. That is supposed to be the largest tree that was ever used inside that church. This is from 1946 or 47, just after the war. Massive, massive tree. The altar and the pulpit are still covered with drop cloths to keep it from being dirtied by soot or sap or whatever would fall out of the trees. I have to tell you, during the Great Depression in 1933, money was so tight in Watertown and so scarce. The choir's records show that in 1933, the choir gave up its music money to buy the candy for the kids' bags at church and to put evergreens in the church so that they could have Christmas, because there was absolutely no money left to buy things. And then after that, gradually people started coming out of the Great Depression. It took a lot of years to recover.
One of those old big trees, it took the telephone company men and the electric company men and the electric company's winch to bring it into St. Mark's.
Yes.
And the old door to the outside had a big gash in it from one of those trees.
Yeah, they would try to wrap the trees or tie them with ropes. And what she's talking about is a couple of the men worked at the power company, and the tree would be delivered along the front of the church. And then they would bring those booms in, and you know, you didn't have to have a permit to close the street, you just did. So they would take that boom and turn the tree lengthwise across the street. And then we still have poles in the church basement. Men were put in pairs, and at the foot end of the tree where the weight was, you had the youngest, most strong men very close together, and at a certain point there was a signal given, and you all raised the poles up on your shoulder, and then they ran the tree through the door to get it down the aisle of the church. And she's right, there are still gouges in the wood from those Christmas trees. This congregation also commissioned a book for their centennial. This is Christmas of 1953. This is from the balcony looking down. And you can see all the little kids who sat closest to the adults so that they could be seen and heard. And then the older kids are on chairs and risers right on up into the altar area. And this photograph was taken by the photographer standing on the altar during the church service to get the photo. You can see the crowds in the church, the gallery, Miss Sievert up on the organ. But this girl has the most beautiful braided hair. The tree is visible, and there are kids sitting under it. I have to tell you, I don't know how many of you ever knew Jean Wilde. She worked in town for many years at Joann Fabrics. We decorated at church for many years. And she was in 6th or 7th grade when she sat over here, and she today is a fabulous seamstress. She was learning to sew as a very young woman, young girl, and she and her mother had worked and worked on her dress for Christmas Eve, and it was something. She said when she went to church, she didn't even want to sit in the car and get a crease on it. She wanted it perfect. And during the service, she felt something on her shoulder, and she thought it was the kid behind her. And then she felt it again. And when they got out of church, the sap had dripped on her new dress. I don't know what her mother did to remedy that. You can't get sap out, but you can always add an applique or something. Later on, like many churches, we went through the 70s where I call this the Christmas shrubs. And then in the 80s, we got permission to go back to live trees, and they took some doing. And we had one fall over. But when we were taking it down, not for putting it up, so that's not so bad.
Not during a service?
No, no. And this was just a reference view looking back into the church with the Christmas decorations. This is a recent picture with the restored artwork. These trees are looking a little short. We also sometimes use an artificial tree that goes up to about over there. But they take less wear and tear on buildings and people. Now, after Christmas, those Christmas trees were undecorated. So let's see, I'll need 3 more. The Christmas trees were undecorated. People weren't quite so particular years ago. The candy might have had a little dust on or a little tree dirt, might have been broken, but it was split up in bowls that every classroom got some candy. And for most kids, that was a treat because they just didn't have a lot of candy at home. So, here's one more. I have candy canes from the tree for Peg Theater, Dick Hayden, Nellie Nichols, and Cliff Luke. And then we have for Bob Webster, Doreen Keel, and Joan Loomis, popcorn balls. Collection of David Hurdle, we have this adorable little girl on Christmas Day. She has received some wonderful gifts. She has a perky Christmas tree in her living room, a little tea set, a little toy piano, some more things on the ground, a little doll behind her. I think she must have been on the good list. And also from David's private collection, this little boy greeting you from, maybe that's going to be the Christmas tree in his living room, I don't know. But he is a very happy fellow, welcoming you and bidding you a happy holiday. Now, you know, it's commonplace to go visiting for the holidays. And sometimes when you go visiting, you should take a little something with you, you know. So we have one last gift so that you're prepared for the holidays. And if somebody stops in unexpected, you can slap a bow on this and say, oh, this has your name all over it. Where's Betty Hebner? Betty Hebner, would you come forward? This is special.
It's got to be fruitcake, Betty, from last year. How far do I have
You're supposed to go all the way up to him.
Yeah, you got to come all the way up here. You did this on purpose.
No, I didn't. I had her draw the name. I'm pure as the driven snow.
I get a hug and a kiss.
Betty is one of our retired guides from the Octagon House, and I really do have fruitcake for you. So there's your fruitcake. Enjoy. I couldn't have paid money for that to happen. So here we are on Washington Street at the Hurdle House after a snowfall. Doesn't that look warm and enchanting? In the window, if you look closely, there are some lights burning. They're home and the Christmas tree is lit. The next house is the Lampy family. Apparently not a creature is stirring. There aren't any lights anywhere. No Christmas lights. Melissa's out at another meeting. And of course, you're always welcome at the Octagon House. This is a view from a few years ago. Snow has fallen. The walk is clean though, and the steps are ready. Of course, you use the back door if you're coming up for a false alarm on the system. This was from about 15 years ago. We had a very large tree in the music room. Some years we economize and we have just a tabletop tree in the music room. Some people don't have enough with one tree, they have 2 or 3. This is looking from my dining room tree into the living room at my house. and sometimes I still light candles in memory of old times. So before we sing the final song, we really appreciate your coming tonight and your support throughout the year. And even though it's a little bit early, the Board of Directors of the Historical Society does wish you a very merry little Christmas. So from 1943, we'll sing Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas. Thank you for accompanying us.
New fallen snow, a still wintry night, a home with gleaming lights. These things are part of Christmas today, as they were yesterday. Let's go back to Grandfather's house for Christmas, a Christmas near the end of the last century. Grandpa Bradford's place is a big, comfortable farmhouse with plenty of room for all the Bradfords. Grandma Bradford has been busy for days preparing for the family reunion. Seems like there's no end of cooking and baking to be done for Christmas dinner tomorrow. Grandma's eldest daughter, Alice, does the more creative work in the family, like making ornaments for the Christmas tree. Old-fashioned ornaments for an old-fashioned Christmas. Today, the kitchen is the center of activity. But tomorrow, the parlor will ring with the shouts of Bradford grandchildren around the tree. The family reunion has already begun. John, the youngest son, arrived this afternoon from the city.
There's no place like home.
It was a long ride on the train, almost 8 hours. It's good to be home, in the midst of familiar sights and sounds.
There, that ought to hold you till morning.
I should think so. Now, what about the parlor?
The wood's in the fireplace. I light the fire first thing in the morning, right after milk.
Alice liked to freeze out there trimming that Christmas tree. Yes, Mother? Did you find the store ornaments? Yeah, I've got the candles and candle holders and everything. I'll be finished with the tree pretty soon. It seems like there's still a million things to do.
Sure smells good in here, Mother.
I suppose by that you mean you want a cookie. Yeah. All right. I'll get you a cup of coffee, too. That'll warm you up. Land sakes, I thought you were never coming in out of that barn.
Can't blame him, Mother. He's pretty excited about that present he's got for Josh out in the barn.
Well, Josh has wanted one for such a long time.
I sure hope he likes that colt.
Oh, John, I surely remember the Christmas that you were 10 and you got one. You could neither sleep or eat.
I know, I'll never forget that Christmas. Say, is Alice still out in the parlor?
Uh-huh.
Gee, it looks beautiful, Alice.
Thanks, John. I hope the children like it.
Of course they will. All done?
Just about. I have all the presents wrapped. This one's yours, by the way. Then I have to finish the mittens for Peter, and that will be that. Alice! John! Come and have a cup of coffee.
Family and home and Christmas Eve. A time for sharing love. A time for being together. Tomorrow, the rest of the Bradford children and grandchildren will come. But now comes the quiet time, before the big day. No Christmas Eve would be complete without Grandpa reading the Bible account of the first Christmas.
And there were in the same country shepherds abiding in the field, keeping watch over their flock by night. And lo, the angel of the Lord came upon them, and the glory of the Lord shone round about them, and they were sore afraid. And the angel said unto them, Fear not, for behold, I bring you good tidings of great joy, which shall be to all people. For unto you is born this day, in the city of David, a Savior, which is Christ the Lord. And this shall be a sign unto you. Ye shall find the babe wrapped in swaddling clothes, lying in a manger. And suddenly there was with the angel a multitude of the heavenly host, praising God and saying, Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace, goodwill toward men.
That was beautiful, Pa.
Yes, and it always seems new and beautiful, year after year. Well, it's getting late. I guess we'd better turn in.
I'm just about finished.
I'm ready.
There, it's done. I'll wrap them tomorrow. I suppose Jane and Clem will come first. Seems how they're the closest. Then Dave and Mary, well, they'll be driving out right after church, of course.
Christmas morning. And as usual, good old Major pulls Dave Bradford and his young family to the Bradford farm where Dave was born. They're the last to arrive. The others are already inside and waiting. The 7-mile ride has been cold for Mary Bradford, but it's been fun for the youngsters. That's Susan, the youngest. Priscilla's well bundled up. Joshua is the oldest of Dave's children.
My, but it's cold out there. Susie, how you have grown, honey. You too, Priscilla. You know your cousins are here.
Is Marjorie here too?
Yes, and Peter. Now you just go on in and find them. Mary. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, Mother. Josh, hurry up. Dave, bring all those presents.
Yes, we're coming.
Josh.
Merry Christmas, Grandma.
So good to have you here.
Oh.
Merry Christmas, Mother.
Merry Christmas, son.
Cold coming?
Mighty cold out. Thought I heard someone.
Uncle John.
Oh, Josh, Merry Christmas, Dave.
Merry Christmas, John. How are you, young fella?
Lend me a hand here. I've got to unhitch Major.
Can I help put Major in the barn, can I?
Well, I don't...
Josh. Let you and I carry the presents in.
Yes, you help. Then you go find your cousin.
Is Peter here?
Yes, he's here. You go on out and find him.
So the reunion is on. The Shelbys are here. Aunt Jane and Uncle Clem. And now aunts and uncles and cousins can all get reacquainted. Jane Shelby and Mary Bradford haven't seen each other for months. There's so many things to talk about. There are many things to see, too. And things happening in every room of the big house.
Golly, no end to these presents, Clem.
Well, let's put them under the tree.
What a pretty dress, Priscilla. Thank you. Can I open the presents?
Open the presents, Susan, dear? No, not now. We have to wait until Grandpa comes home, and then we can open all of them.
Well, I wonder what's keeping Pa.
Yes, and that husband of mine.
Shall I go out in the barn and see, Grandma?
Oh, no, Josh. I expect he's just showing your father some of his new harness.
Josh, how would you like to ask Grandma for a cookie?
Oh, yes, of course. Right there in that brown jar, Josh. And take a few extra with you for Priscilla and Peter and the rest.
Well, here we are. Hello, Joshua.
Grandpa.
Mary.
Hello, Father. Did you take care of Major all right?
Yes, he's been stabled and fed.
You sure do love that old horse, don't you? I suppose you'd like to have one of your own someday.
That would be something. Is that Grandpa? Come on, we're waiting for you. Can you pass out the presents now, can you?
Certainly can. Priscilla, my little girl.
Light the tree, light the tree.
And now, old-fashioned candlelight for an old-fashioned Christmas. They'll enjoy it while they can, for the candles will not be allowed to burn too long. And where is the child who has not loved this moment at Christmas time? Why, the tree is almost as exciting as the gifts themselves. Grandfathers are pretty popular in most families, and Grandpa Bradford is no exception. The family wouldn't think of exchanging the gifts themselves. Grandpa has to pass out each one. That's part of Christmas at the farm. And who can say which is the happier, the receiver or the giver? A fountain pen, one of those new ones that carries its own ink. Now, what do you suppose Priscilla wants most of all? Will their little girl like it? Toys and Christmas go together. The porcelain doll came from a city far away. But not all the gifts come from stores. Many were made at home. Knitting a pair of mittens for a nephew can bring a wonderful reward. A tablecloth crocheted with loving care makes it more precious somehow. And what will it be for the youngest child? What is Susan hoping for? Of course, a teddy bear. For Grandma, a shawl to keep and treasure. These are gifts that carry with them a family's love. Some gifts bring with them a part of the world beyond this house. That's one of the wonders of the age, a phonograph. Came all the way from Chicago. This will mean music and song for the whole family. Hours of pleasure in the quiet evenings. This will be pleasure too. A sled for Peter. Straight from Grandpa's workshop. And for Josh, something very dear to his heart. A book about a horse, Black Beauty. And he is a beauty. What a wonderful morning it's been. Giving, sharing, being together.
Dave. Dave.
Yes, Pa?
It's getting a little chilly in here. Don't you think you'd better go out and get that big log for the fire?
Yes, I'll get it right away.
Well, I guess that's all the presents. That is almost all. There's one more present that was too big to put under the tree. You all know that Josh had a birthday last month. Now that he's 10 years old, he's old enough to have this something. It is a sort of a combined birthday and Christmas gift. Of course, when Peter's 10 years old, I aim to give him the same thing. Josh, go to the window now.
A cold. A cold. Golly.
It seems that once in every child's life comes the time when he gets the one gift he treasures above all others. And for Josh, this is the one. Probably the whole family will want to help Josh pick a name for his coat. Oh, what fun Josh will have riding him in the spring. Josh never dreamed that the best Christmas present of all was in Grandpa's barn.
Well, he sure was a happy boy. Yes, and there'll be no living with Peter now until he's old enough to have a coat. Well, now, maybe we can get this dinner finished. Alice, would you go out and pack and get that pitcher of cream? And Mary, would you please cut those pies? Oh, the goose.
Let me see. The children will be here.
Here, let me help you with that, Alice.
Now that was your Uncle Jeff, the one that was in the Civil War.
My, this fresh coffee smells good. No, Susan. Don't eat the cookie off the tree. Take this one.
There she is, Priscilla. She's ready for a nap. Let's go ask your mother to play the piano for us. All right.
So I call this customer on the telephone.
On the telephone over 300 miles?
Why, sure. I've called further than that.
Well, I never.
It's the common thing, Pa. I'll bet one day you'll have a telephone right in this house, just like the city folks. Sure, and then you can call John most any time.
Or if you want something down at the general store,
Now let's
call them up
see.
and tell them to bring it out.
Here's one I think you'll like.
What?
Pretty, isn't it? Alice, you like to sing. Go on in. We're almost through here.
Well, we thought you boys would never leave that cold. Sure is a beauty, Mother.
And smart, too. You boys get washed up now. We're almost ready for dinner.
And so a family gathers for Christmas dinner. But more than that, a home is filled with warmth and love and goodwill.
I've got it, Mother.
Good. That's all.
Everything all right?
Has everybody seated now? Here, set it right here. I believe we're ready now, Pa.
Our Heavenly Father, for these gifts we are about to receive, we thank Thee. We ask Thy blessing upon this house and upon these Thy servants, gathered together through Thy bounteous guidance and love. Amen.
Gathered together for Christmas, 3 generations of a happy family. Parents who have worked to make their dreams come true, and children who brighten the lives of all. This was Christmas yesterday, when life on Grandfather's farm was a little slower, perhaps a little gentler. A life we call old-fashioned. Life that was part of an old-fashioned American Christmas.